I was dying. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't an exaggeration. It was a silent fact that filled my body with a chill that didn't feel like fainting or feverish. It was a different kind of cold, eternal, not belonging to the body. The ambulance was racing in the distance. The voices of doctors, the screams of my mother, the bright lights, the oxygen mask, all this seemed to be happening to me and without me at the same time. My mind drifted in and out of the abyss, grasping at every whisper of life. But at some point, everything stopped. Not pain, not panic, just silence. Do you know what it's like to disappear but stay? It's like taking off your skin and hanging it on a coat rack and stepping into a room where there's never any light. Thus began my dying. Or maybe my encounter with the present. I don't know where the line is. My name was Sarah Bennett, 26, Kentucky. Vain. Take heart. Studied. She was crying. Believed it. Sometimes. Just like everyone else. But no one said that to die is to face what you've been ignoring all your life. I was standing in the middle of something. It wasn't a corridor or a street. This wasn't heaven. And it certainly wasn't hell. It was a place beyond all definitions. A white mist that goes to infinity. It wasn't dense, but you couldn't see the horizon in it. At first I thought I was alone. But then I felt no. Someone is watching. And not in a hostile way. Just waiting. It's like I'm late to an appointment I made before I was even born. And then I saw him. He didn't walk, he didn't swim, he didn't approach. He just was. He was in the center of this white nothingness, and everything in this place, including me, turned to him like a flower to the sun. I couldn't be mistaken. I knew who it was. His gaze was like water and fire at the same time. His face was not intimidating, but there was no room for lies or masks in his presence. I felt completely disassembled, like an open book whose lines he knew even before I wrote them. He didn't speak with his mouth. His words were like the voice of my conscience inside me, only infinitely pure. You're asking me where you are, Sarah. I nodded, but my head didn't move. It wasn't a body, and it wasn't a normal conversation. It's a place where many people go, but few people remember. And you're one of them. Because you had to hear it. Hear what? I asked inside myself. Why me? He didn't answer right away. Silence was part of his response. Then, because you asked. All my life. Even when I refused to believe it. I remembered, yes. I was always looking for something. I read, doubted, argued. I have always felt that there is something behind the veil of the world that does not fit into our logic, in science, in medicine, in religion as a system. Something alive. And now it was something that stood in front of me. I'm dead. I asked. You were close. Enough to see. Not enough to stay. Why am I allowed to see this? Because you have to tell the others. He raised his hand, not threateningly, but as if inviting me to see more. You want to know what the dead do? Not the ones that rest in peace, and those who did not find peace. I felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath me. The world began to change. The white mist split open like ice, and I saw, not fire, not darkness, but people. Lots of people. They were moving. Someone was thrashing around. Someone repeated the same action. Someone was sitting with their hands over their faces. Some whispered words in languages I didn't know. Some were silent, but their eyes were filled with terror. Is this hell? This is the detention center. Those who can't leave. They're not bad. Not cursed. Just tied up. Fear. A desire. Pride. Hate. Or just an unlived pain. Do they know they're dead? Some of them. Others don't. They repeat their last thoughts. Again and again. This is not a punishment. This is their condition. I started to shake. It was worse than the hell out of the books. Hell is like fire, simple. But this, it was a reflection of our own chains, reinforced by eternity. What can I do? I asked, even though I was afraid to hear the answer. You must tell me. About those who didn't leave. About the importance of letting go. To forgive. Get rid of the chains in life. Because after that, it's harder. Much harder. I felt the world around me begin to fade. Like it was all a dream, but too real to be a lie. He gave me one last look before disappearing. Remember, death is not the end. But a lot of things are fixed at that moment. Tell them they can still come back, while they're still breathing. Sometimes what you saw behind the veil looks back at you. He never looks away again. I woke up in a room flooded with daylight. White ceiling. A faint antiseptic smell. Heart monitor sound. The hum of the air conditioner. It was all too real. Too ordinary. But I wasn't ordinary anymore. My mother sat next to me, her head bowed sleepily. On her lap is a crumpled newspaper. Next to it is a cup of cold coffee. I heard her sigh before I realized I was awake. Sarah, her voice was cracked and shaky, as if she didn't believe I was back. I tried to smile, but the muscles in my face weren't working properly. It was like I was learning to be alive again. Where am I? You're in the clinic. Louisville. You almost died, baby. You were in anaphylactic shock. The doctors said you were out of access. 4 minutes. They were already preparing. I nodded. I knew it. I remembered every second of that off-limits experience. Every look of Jesus, every word, every soul caught in its endless loop. But I couldn't talk about it yet. My mother stroked my hand, and I stared out the window. There, behind the glass, people were walking down the street. Someone was leading the dog. Someone was laughing on the phone. Someone was carrying coffee and didn't realize that their footsteps sounded on the edge of two worlds. I closed my eyes, but instead of darkness, I saw them. Faces. Those who didn't leave. Those who stayed in between. They didn't disappear. They waited. A day later, I was sitting in a chair by the window. My fingers were shaking, as if my body was still cold. But the strangest thing is the mirror. It was right in front of the bed. It's small, round, and has a metal frame. When I looked into it, something was wrong. My face felt strange. The look is unfamiliar. Not demonic, not malevolent. Just like it's not mine. And every time I caught my reflection in the mirror, it seemed to me that it was a little late. Or moves differently than I do. One night I couldn't stand it. I opened my eyes and the mirror was looking at me. No, not literally. But the feeling was stronger than logic. It's like someone's inside. It was as if what I saw on the other side had found its way in. And then I heard his voice again. Quiet. Unstable. It's like a rustle of thoughts, but not mine. Sarah, the vision wasn't a dream. You are the carrier. I jumped up abruptly. My heart was pounding as if in alarm. The ward was empty. Just the moon on the wall. But the voice remained. I went to the mirror. Gradually. Hesitantly. And I looked. Deep. Right in the eyes. And then he moved. Not me. It's from the inside out. And I understood. Some souls who have been left behind in the looking glass are looking for the door. And if you look too long at where they were banished from, they might see you in return. In the morning, I asked the nurse to remove the mirror. She was surprised, but didn't argue. But it didn't help. Because a mirror is not an object. It's in me now. It watches my every move, my every dream, my every word. I began to understand that after meeting the one on the other side, you no longer belong to yourself alone. And the dead who are not gone, they hear you. Because you were there. Because now you're the guide. And the worst part? I felt that one of these souls was already inside. Some tracks don't leave any dust. They leave a presence. On my third night back, I heard him breathing for the first time. It wasn't close. Not outside the door. Not in the ward. It was in me. It was as if someone else was breathing somewhere deep in my chest slowly, heavily, with an effort, as if every breath he took resisted life, but still made its way through me. I lay motionless, as if under hypnosis. His eyes were open, but his vision was out of focus. Space was blurring into gray waves, and every rustle of the hospital sounded like the thud of a bell. And then silence. But not calm. And waiting. I didn't know how long it was before I could move again. I got up and went to the window. It's still night. Still a hospital. An ambulance passed slowly below, its headlights cutting through the darkness. People were sleeping. The world continued to move as if nothing had happened. But I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Dr. Lee came in the next morning. He was young, with Asian features, wore glasses, and spoke in a flat voice. He noticed my aloofness and asked the standard questions. How are you feeling? Are you sleeping normally? Are there any disturbing dreams? I almost laughed. Dreams? It wasn't a dream. It was an invasion. But I answered, it's all right. I just feel like I'm not quite back. He nodded, as if he'd heard it before. But I couldn't understand it. It happens. After clinical death, there is often a certain detachment from the body. This is the normal recovery phase. I nodded back. I thought to myself, no, doctor. This is not detachment from the body. This is angels. That night I heard his voice for the first time. It didn't sound like a voice, no vibrations, no sound. It was a word inside my mind, but not mine. Sarah. He knew my name. But he didn't say it, he knew it. It was like being inside the archive of my memory, flipping through my pages, choosing lines. I froze. Who are you? The answer didn't come immediately. First, the image. A face that has no features. It moved, transformed, as if made of smoke. The eyes are empty, but not blind people. They saw, but not through their eyes. And through what lies deeper. I'm the one who didn't make it. And now I'm going through you. I backed away from the wall. My heart was beating wildly. I fell to my knees, feeling my body become a stranger. My fingers were shaking. My palms were sweating. Chest as if squeezed. Why? Why through me? Because you opened up. You were looking too deep. And I saw you. I remembered you. Do I know you? All of you are bound. But you are the only one who has spoken to the one who judges. And now you're the gate. It wasn't just scary. It was metaphysically terrifying. The fear is not for the body, for reality, for a border that I no longer control. The next day, the pastor came in. He came at my mother's request. She was alarmed. She noticed my behavior, my silence, my sleepless nights. He sat down next to her. A kind look. Gray hair. Hands folded in her lap. I heard you saw something important to Sarah. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I started to cry. No sobbing. Just tears, as if the soul was trying to get out through the eyes. I do not know where I end, or where he begins, I whispered. The pastor wasn't afraid. He just closed his eyes and said softly, we often ask God to show himself, but we rarely understand what's behind it. That night I heard breathing again, but it was louder, and I knew he was getting stronger. It feeds on my memory. I started forgetting names. Forget why you got up. What my mother said. What is the doctor's name? Small things. It fills in the blanks with itself. And if I don't stop it, it will switch completely. God was not alone when he created the world. Too many people look out of the shadows to forget their involvement. I don't dream. Only observations. I lie in the dark, and I can feel him studying my breath, reading it like an ancient language forgotten in the dust of the world. I can feel him listening to my thoughts, like he's learning to be me. A parasite, but not a biological one. Spiritual. And tonight he said the name. Caleb. The whispers came out of the darkness like dry grass driven by nothing. He didn't identify himself. He remembered himself. The name rang in my head, but it echoed in the room, the wall, the furniture, my body. It was as if everything around him had become the acoustics of his presence. I said the name out loud, almost inaudibly. Caleb. And at that moment, the paint cracked in the wall. A thin, crooked line. It was a small detail, but I'd been looking at it all day, and I knew it wasn't there. The next day, there was a scream in the hospital room. From another room. I stepped out into the hallway. The nurses came running. One of the patients, Mr. Holden, an elderly veteran, was in a state of panic. He was being held down by 2 paramedics. He was shouting, "Don't let him in. It's coming through someone. Through it." He was pointing at me. On me. They put it down to his dementia, schizophrenia, manifestations of war in the mind. But I knew he'd sensed Caleb. He saw it in my eyes. And that night, Mr. Holden died. For no apparent reason. It's just, my heart stopped beating. I was sitting in a chair in front of the mirror that now stands in the corner. Not a real mirror. I became a reflection myself. A mirror in which the dead look. I looked at him, and he looked at me. And then Calum showed up. Not a form, but by projection. A shadow cast not by the body, but by the idea. I'm not mean Sarah. I am the separated one. From what? From the will. From the light. From the universe that refused to complete me. What do you want from me? To be finished. To be reborn. Through you. The next day, I noticed that my handwriting had changed. I kept a diary in an attempt to preserve the remnants of my mind. But in the morning I opened the page and saw a phrase written in my hand, but not by me. No one lives alone. Even after death. The page was covered in symbols I didn't recognize, but understood. It was a language like the ancient runes, but alive, moving. Words are like living organisms. The letters are like sleeping eyes. I tore up the page, but it didn't break. The paper has become denser. Like leather. Calum becomes physical. My mother came in the evening. I brought you photos from my childhood. She wanted to bring me back to reality. We were sitting there, and I was looking at a photo of myself as a 5-year-old, my hair in disarray, my eyes shining. So alive. And suddenly in the background of the photo, I noticed a figure. Shadow. It was next to the window. Then I thought, exposure error. But now, I knew his power now. He didn't enter after death. It was always there. The last night before I was discharged, I went to the wall where the paint had cracked. I put my hand up and felt the warmth. It's like something is breathing from inside the wall. And on the white surface, slowly, as if from ashes, a word appeared. Someone else's handwriting. Calum. He writes himself into the world. When you become a gate, you are no longer human. You turn into a road. And the road doesn't ask who's walking on it. I insisted on being discharged. The doctors didn't mind, the tests were normal, and I was recovering physically. But mentally, no one could help me with that. My mom drove me home to Kentucky. A small house on the outskirts of Louisville. Creaking floors, familiar smells. Everything seemed safe here, frozen in eternity. The carpet in the hallway, the old piano, the picture of my father. But there was no going back inside me. The first thing I noticed at home were the mirrors. Every reflection was too attentive. I didn't see Calum directly, but in the depths of the pupils, a second face, as if hiding behind my eyes. I covered the mirrors, cleaned them. I even turned off my phone so I couldn't see the front-facing camera. But reflection is not glass. This is consciousness. And Calum knew how to enter. One evening, Lily, my younger cousin, came to see me. She was only 10, but she was always oddly sensitive. She looked at me like an adult. We were sitting in the kitchen. She was drawing. And suddenly, without looking up from the sheet, she said, "Sarah, there's something else inside you, isn't there?" I froze. "What did you say?" "He misses himself. And he's hungry." Lily continued to draw. I leaned over and saw that she wasn't drawing my face with charcoal, but a double one. Mine, and then the other, as if soldered into my shadow. I tried to leave. Just leave. The car, the road, the fog. I felt like I was leaving it all behind. But when I looked in the rearview mirror at the traffic light, I didn't recognize myself. The eyes were deeper, color darker, and the skin looked smooth, as if painted, like those who have not breathed for a long time. I pulled over to the side of the road. She covered her face with her hands, and she whispered, "My God, what have you let into me?" And then I heard, "I'm not asking you to be yourself. All I ask is to be a door." I went to church. The last hope is prayer. St. Barnabas Church. Small, old, with a stone threshold where I was once baptized. Pastor James met me at the altar. He listened carefully. I didn't interrupt. His face was calm, but I could see his fingers gripping the cross on the chain. He said, "It happens that not only God is looking for a vessel. Sometimes forgotten souls also seek forms. And if they fall into an unprepared heart, they begin to grow." I asked, "And if I've already become that vessel?" He was silent for a long time. And then he answered, "Then you should ask that the door be closed on both sides. And you know who's the only one who can do it." I prayed that night. For real. With a shout. With desperation. And in response, silence. Not divine, but heavy, as if I was praying down instead of up. And out of that silence came the sound of, "He hears. But it's waiting for you to find out who you're wearing." I left the house in the morning. Sunny day. People in the park. The children laugh. But among the passers-by, I began to recognize their faces. Some people stared at me for too long. Some quickly turned away. One man passing by said, "Caleb," in a whisper, almost soundlessly, but I heard it. And I understood. I'm not the only one who became the door. When a person dies, he disappears from the chronicle of the world. But that doesn't mean it disappears from the world itself. After that day in the park, I couldn't deny the obvious anymore. Caleb wasn't alone. And I'm not alone. We are a chain. Only it's not a chain of prisoners. This is something ancient. Threads drawn through flesh, time, and perception. I started looking. Not on the internet, there are no such searches. I went deeper. Through strange forums, archived dream recordings, and articles deleted before publication. And I found the term. Echo carriers. Without details. No descriptions. Just scraps. Hints. She stopped seeing her reflection. Only traces. He spoke with a voice that he was afraid of. When they died, a sound came out of their mouths that they couldn't record. And most often, the name hidden under layers, hidden in ciphers. Caleb. 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 Variations. Mistakes. Or maybe echoes of the same thing. Through private messages, I reached out to a woman named Rebecca Clinton who lives in Iowa. She sent me a voice message. Quiet, as if recorded under a blanket. You can feel it, can't you? Inside. Sometimes it feels like he's controlling your hand. Or your lips. You think that's what you think. But it is he who remembers himself through you. Her voice was trembling, but not out of fear. From knowledge. He wasn't a demon. And he wasn't an angel. He is oblivion that has become hungry. He lived up to our time. And now he wants to go back. I asked, "Why does he choose us?" She replied, "Because we were almost dead. Because we have seen the one who judges. This means that we have become cracks, through which the light goes out." I could feel Caleb changing. He wasn't hiding anymore. Now he was watching me openly. Sometimes with irony, with an awareness of their power. He no longer needed convincing. He knew I was bound. And one day he said, "There are others like you. I call them echo shadows. We are going to. Soon. You will feel the call." The next day a letter arrived. Paper content. Without a stamp. It was just lying on the doorstep. Inside only the map. And coordinates. Somewhere in Wyoming. The old ranch. And the date is in 2 weeks. On the back was written a single phrase. "You've already started walking. There's nowhere to go back." I didn't know what I'd find there. A cult? Imposters? Madmen? But deep inside, I knew it. I'm not alone. And we are not random. We are the echoes of something that should have remained in the void. Some places do not store a story, but an intention. And those who come there are not guests. They are invited guests. I drove out of Kentucky in my father's old car. The road led across the plains, past sleeping villages where time seemed to curl in on itself. The radio wasn't picking up any stations. GPS turned off. But I knew I wouldn't get lost. I was led by him. Or they. 3 days later I reached Wyoming. Outback. Further than the distance. Further than loneliness. It's as if the earth here has refused to remember civilization. The map led me to a half-abandoned ranch. Faded boards, sagging wires. Everything looked dead, but not abandoned. A man was standing at the gate. About 40 years old. A shabby hat, a sunburned face, and the eyes of those who no longer fully live in this world. He looked at me and nodded. "Sarah." We waited. There were 5 people inside the house. The 6th, on the 2nd floor, did not go down. I'll understand later. He prayed nonstop so he wouldn't start talking. I was greeted calmly, without further ado. Their faces. I've seen them before. In a dream. Not as people, but as images that fade at the edge of dreams. Rebecca is the one I spoke to. Gray streaks, a face with a thin stamp of humility. There was Mary, a schoolteacher from Idaho, and Tom, a former military man with burns all over his back in the shape of a letter written in his sleep. It wasn't insanity that united them. Not fear. And understanding. They were vessels just like me. We sat around the campfire at night. Someone was reading Psalms. Someone was looking up at the sky. And then Mary said aloud, "What if he doesn't want destruction? What if he's a returnee? Not a destroyer, but a rejected son?" The silence fell like instant death. Rebecca answered quietly, "Then we're not possessed. We are the gateway to his temple. Last night I dreamed of a house. Not this one. Another. Where the ceiling is infinitely high and the walls are made of living stone. There were those who had died but not disappeared. They looked at me and waited for my words. And when I opened my mouth, it wasn't me. The return begins with recognition. And you are his eyes, scattered over the body of the world." The next morning, one of us, Ray, disappeared. He left behind only a scorched circle in the grass. No sign of a struggle. No sound at night. In its place, we found only a book. The Bible. But there was no text inside. Only blank pages, and on the last one, a handprint pressed into the paper. And then Rebecca said, "He's not gathering us for the union. It's for the sake of remembering yourself." She said that in one of her transition prayers, a special state between sleep and reality, she saw how Caleb was not alone. With him were others, like original entities discarded by reality. He is not a god. He is a shadow between the gods. Something that wasn't completed. And now he completes himself us. That night we decided, you need to talk to him directly. Through open. That is, someone who can let it go without resistance, for a few minutes. The sacrifice is temporary. Theoretically. Tom volunteered. Former military man. We placed him in the center of a circle drawn in charcoal. Candles were lit. And we began to read in turn what was called the voiceless liturgy, texts that came to each of us on different nights. Symbols, phrases, unrelated. But when we read them together, the meaning came out. Not like the meaning of ordinary language. And like the movement at the bottom of the skin. Then Tom looked up. His eyes were blacker than night. He said, "You don't talk to me. You collect yourself. There aren't 6 of you. There's only 1 of you. And I am your reflection." And then he looked at me. "Just look at me. Sarah, you're the last point. Through you will open the place where the world intersects itself." He fell. Unconscious. We thought he was dead. But he was breathing. The body is alive, the soul is on the edge. And I understood. I wasn't invited. I was created. Some coordinates cannot be represented by numbers. They exist in the geography error. The moment when space said, "I'm not alone anymore." We stayed at the ranch for 3 more days. Tom didn't wake up. He lay there as if the dialogue was still going on inside him, and the body was temporarily unnecessary. Everyone else was waiting. But something was heating up inside me. It was burning. The pressure. Tom's words never left me. You're the last point. Through you, the place where the world intersects itself will open up. I started seeing his dreams. The dreams aren't his. Dreams of his eyes. In these dreams, there was the same image, a huge white door standing in the middle of a snowy plain. Next to the door is a tree without leaves, on which instead of branches, hands. And the voice. Not loud. Almost a whisper. "Sarah, you're on your way there. You just don't know yet that the road is you." I said to Rebecca, "I have to find this place." She looked at me with an expression that said, "Are you sure you want to see me?" But instead just nodded. "There's a place. We call it the Eye of Sushi. It's not on the map. Even the locals don't go there. There's no grass growing there. Birds don't fly. There's no time running out. It listens." I left alone. The car stalled every 2 hours. But as soon as I got closer to the coordinates, it became easier. As if something was pushing, easing the way. I got there at sunset. The place was empty. A shapeless plain, scorched grass, no sound. Even the wind didn't seem to want to touch the ground. In the center is a stone. Black as obsidian. There were no inscriptions on it. But when I put my hand on it, something inside me responded. Not Caleb. Not me. I stood in absolute silence as the space shuddered slightly. It was as if not the air, but the perception itself was compressed for a split second. And a silhouette appeared in the air in front of me. Female. He didn't have a body. It consisted of a subtle glow, like a shadow made by light. She spoke without a mouth. I heard it inside. You came, Sarah. You're not a man to go back on. You have a name that isn't in the sound. You are the place where he will return. I asked, who are you? The answer didn't come in words. Instead, a memory that couldn't have been mine. 3 children in the temple, crying without tears. A fire that extinguishes light, but does not provide heat. A voice that says, I refuse to be forgotten. When I woke up, it was morning. I lay by the rock, covered in frost, but not frozen. There's a sign on my arm. Not a scar, not a tattoo. Rather, it is an internal symbol printed under the skin. Not a sign of belonging. Function sign. I went back to the ranch. Rebecca looked at me and immediately understood. He came to see you, didn't he? I nodded. Then you're not Sarah anymore. I wanted to protest, but I couldn't. Because deep down I knew. Sarah stayed on that plane. And the one who came back is an eye for something bigger than human history. Tom opened his eyes that night. His first words were, everything's ready. Only one candle remained. When it is lit, the border will not hold. I asked, what candle? He looked at me, and he said quietly, you. They think hell is a place. But hell is the moment when you realize that your will is no longer yours. At dawn, I felt him inside, not as a voice, not as someone else's thought, and as a new feeling, as if one organ has been replaced by another, more ancient one. The heart? No. Something deeper. The core of desire. I didn't wake up again. I was getting turned on. I began to see the world differently. The shadow of the objects began to lag for a fraction of a second, as if the light did not agree that they exist. The people seemed empty. Their words are a rustle in an old library where the pages have forgotten they were written. On the 3rd day, the pain returned. Not physical. A memorable one. It was like I was starting to remember someone else's life. A life lived out of time. Outside of bodies. And this life sobbed in me. Rebecca put her hand on my shoulder. We've all been through this. But you're not like us. You're no longer the middleman. You are the torch. I didn't know whether to be happy or cry. I didn't even know whose pain was in me. He's using you, she said. But not as a tool. And as clothes for the return. I went back to the stone. Back to where I'd first become Nosera. This time I wasn't silent. I screamed into the void. Why did you choose me? Why not something else? Silence. But she answered. Through the flash inside the chest. You're a door because you were empty. I thought back to my childhood. How my mother was lying in the bathroom with her veins cut. Like my father didn't come back for months. How I stood in front of the mirror, trying to figure out if I even existed. And I understood. Caleb did not choose the strong. He was looking for cracks. Those who no longer believed they deserved to be saved. That night we performed the rite. Last. We sat in a circle. 7 of them. Tom held the goat's skull, and Mary lit a black candle. Rebecca read the phrase in the dead language that had come to her in her dream. Everyone added something related to their rebirth to the fire. I brought a letter. The one that was on the doorstep at the very beginning. With the keyword, you've already started walking. There's nowhere to go back. When it caught fire, the air trembled. The circle did not close, it deepened. Down. Under the world. Where the sound is afraid of itself. And then a silhouette rose from the fire. Caleb. Not as a person. Not like a demon. As a memory of the awareness that once loved God, but ceased to be a creation, because it realized itself as a creator. He looked at me. Sarah, you're ready now. There's only one thing left. Burn the name. I didn't understand. What you think of yourself is the gate. Burn the Sarah. And I will enter in fullness. That night, I looked in the mirror and tried to say my name, but the tongue refused. I realized I couldn't feel it anymore. It's like I'm nameless. It was in this void, this utter vulnerability, that I heard reality exhale me. When darkness demands, light does not argue. It just stands there. And it doesn't go away. With the third night after the rite came sleep. Not the one who sleeps. The one that comes to wake you up inside him. I was standing on an empty plain, and the sky was as low as a dungeon ceiling. The air flowed in the opposite direction. Everything was moving not forward, but to the source. There's a figure in front of me. But not Caleb. This silhouette had no features. The face was eyeless, lipless. But there was something about him that Caleb didn't have, a reluctance to take. He didn't demand it. He didn't need me. It was closer than anything I'd ever known. He held out his hand. Not as a call. As a memory. I knew you before your name. To the point of pain. To the void. I'm not asking, Sarah. I know. At that moment, something inside me exploded. It was as if the fear had receded not because it had disappeared, but because someone had believed in me when I had already forgotten that it was possible to be alive. And then I saw 2 images. Caleb is like an expanding swarm. Millions of eyes, millions of wills trying to become one. And the other one is nameless, standing still like a center with no purpose other than love. When I woke up, my body was cold. But there's fire in my chest. Another. Not burning. Illuminating. Rebecca was looking at me, and there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. You heard him, didn't you? I nodded. But he didn't. He never talks. Because it was before the tongue. Tom came over. There are tears in his eyes. He rarely spoke, but now said, "So all is not lost yet." I didn't understand what that meant until tonight. Caleb came to see me. Not in the body. Not in a dream. Inside. He spoke through my thoughts, as if they were pillars he was climbing. You let the other one touch you. You're not clean anymore. You broke the channel. I could feel his anger, not as an emotion, like a shadow crawling over bones. He wanted to destroy me from the inside out. But then I said, I'm not afraid of you. Because I'm not alone. I'm not yours. And for the first time, he paused. After that, Rebecca and I started reading the Song of the Otherworlders, lyrics that neither of us remembered learning. They didn't sound like a defense, but a reminder that the light doesn't have to win, it just stays. And then I realized who the other one was. Not Jesus. Not an angel. And the one who remembered me before the pain. He hadn't come to fight Caleb. He came to remember me, completely. Every battle begins when you decide that you are not what you were before. That day I knew it was time. Caleb did not speak again. He couldn't. He was tired. But I didn't need to hear him to know he was closer than ever. He was no longer an entity that could be destroyed. He was my shadow. It wasn't a physical threat. This was something even more terrifying. He was looking for me to be an extension of him. It wasn't a war. It was an invitation to embrace your darkness. I stood on the edge of the cliff, staring into space. The very stone on which I had sworn to forget my name lay before me. But now I wasn't the one who could erase it. I was the one who could recreate it. The stars were dim. The moon lit up only the shadows. But all around an invisible river, like blood, like a ritual that doesn't require words. Just a choice. Rebecca came to me, her eyes quiet. Are you ready, Sarah? I looked at her. Deep look with one question. Ready for what? She took a step closer. Meeting with yourself. That night, when I closed my eyes, Caleb returned. But not in my head. He was in this world. In the air. In the void. You can't leave now, Sarah. You are the words in the body. You are the tool, not the end. You and I are one entity. I did not say. I stood there. I felt my hand touch the stone again. It was warm but not outside. He was warm inside me. I got closer, and suddenly there was a gap. There was no pain. But there was a fall. Caleb bumped into me, but not from the outside. He stood up inside me, like a feather passing through the soul. I could feel his hands melting into mine, his eyes boring into mine. It was a moment when you weren't in control of how you felt. When the shadows of eternity, the darkness itself, became a part of you. You're me. But here, I felt another hand. A warm one. A soft one. It couldn't be mine. It was she who pushed Calum away. Not in words. Just by being there. I didn't know who it was. But I felt that this was my only chance to survive. The light filled me, and suddenly I realized that not every action has a name behind it. Not every choice has power behind it. There was only silence in which I could breathe on my own. Rebecca was there. She didn't need words. She held me as a mother holds a baby who returns to the world. There was no victory. There was no conquest. Only the choice to be yourself in spite of everything. Despite all expectations. Calum was gone. Not because he was exiled, but because he was already a part of it. He couldn't threaten me anymore, because I was already what he was trying to destroy. But I became something more. And then I understood. Shadows don't determine light. Light is just what remains when you stop being afraid. The light does not seek its own victory. It simply exists. He was never called. He was always here, in the very shadows. I was standing on the edge, where the world begins to fall apart, like sand blown into the void. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about the past, or Calum, or what came before. I stood where I could finally be myself, not trying to break out of the shackles I'd put on myself. The stars that had once seemed distant and alien were now a part of me. Their light was the same as their breath, barely noticeable, but continuous. Rebecca was standing next to him. She didn't speak, but her presence was what I was looking for. "You're back," she said softly. I nodded. I wasn't what I used to be, but I also couldn't be what Calum was trying to make me. I was here, in this moment, as I always should have been. The wind rose like an ancient prayer, and suddenly the world around me was empty. I felt the emptiness not as fear, but as something familiar, like the house you go back to when you've forgotten everything. I felt that time was no longer my enemy. I was free, not from the shadow, but from my own perception of it as a threat. Calum, light and dark, and I were all one. It's just that the light was my choice. At that moment, I realized that there was no need to look for a way out of the shadows. You need to be the one who stood in the middle of it, not trying to leave. Like a heart that never stops, even when you can't hear it anymore. I stared off into space. Down there, at the point where this world intersects with eternity, I saw, as if right in front of me, someone who stood and watched everything that happened. He didn't say a word. He just was. Not as a face. Not like a hand. But as a presence that no longer needed words, because it knew I was already there. It wasn't Jesus. It was the one who stood next to me at the very first step, when I thought that I would have no place in this world. It was the same power that gave me the choice not to be afraid. I took a step forward. And at that moment, the entire world began to shrink, but not as a threat. It shrank, as if everything around me had suddenly become part of my inner space. The world I stood in was like a mirror reflecting everything I'd left behind and everything I'd become. My life wasn't a finale. She was the beginning. And when the world finally fell apart, I realized that there was no beginning or end for me. I became what remains after all the shadow and all the light is selected. I looked around. Rebecca was no longer standing next to me, but I knew she was right where I was. She was in every moment of this journey. She was what was left when I no longer aspired to something. I was myself again, but this time in the sense that being myself is not a matter of strength or will. This is a necessity. And so, when I took the last step, I could no longer distinguish between where I end and where this world begins. I realized that being light doesn't mean conquering darkness. It means staying where they merge, where one cannot be without the other. And as I stood there in that moment, I smiled. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I was already home.